Okay. Okay, we all set?
We're all set.
Great, thank you, Eleanor. Good evening. I'm calling this public hearing to order in accordance with the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, MGLC 131, Section 40, and the Boston Wetlands Ordinance, Boston City Code Ordinances, Chapter 7-1.4. The Boston Conservation Commission will hold a virtual public hearing on Wednesday, August 16th, 2023, to review the following projects to determine what conditions, if any, the commission will impose in order to protect the interests of the public and private water supply, groundwater, prevention of pollution, flood control, prevention of storm damage, protection of fisheries and land containing shellfish, and protection of wildlife habitat. This evening's public hearing will be followed by a regular meeting. In accordance with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, we are conducting this meeting online. To ensure public access to the deliberations of the Conservation Commission, the public may access this call through telephone and video conferencing. Additionally, the meeting is being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your video. Members of the public may have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment on applications and discussions. To do so, please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging a Twitter handle @BostonEnviro and using the hashtag ConComHearing. For the record, I am Michael Parker, Chair of the Commission. Could staff please identify themselves?
Elena Itamari with the Environment Department.
Thank you.
Christopher Edwards with the Environment Department.
Thank you. I'll call the roll of commissioners present. Commissioner Sullivan.
John Sullivan.
Commissioner Long.
Nick Long.
Commissioner Wilson.
Mike Wilson.
Commissioner Conan.
Conan Thiruvengadam, I'm here, Chair Parker.
Thank you. Commissioner Richmond.
Alice Richmond.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, first item on the agenda is notice of intent for DEP file number 0061951 and Boston file number 2023-041 from Beals and Thomas Inc. on behalf of the McClellan Highway Development Company, LLC, for the proposed installation of a 20-foot wide community path generally parallel to the southeastern property line of the Suffolk Downs redevelopment project located at the William F. McClellan Highway, East Boston. The resource area is a riverfront area, 25-foot waterfront area, 100-foot buffered inland bank. This matter has been continued from the July 19th, 2023 hearing. Who's here on behalf of the applicant?
I am Liz Clark, and I'm also joined by Doug Mans from HYM and Mark Costa from VHB.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. So thank you for your supplemental materials. And so if we could just cover what you sent to us. I just want to make a note that Commissioner Herbst is not able to make this meeting, but I talked to her yesterday about your supplemental submission, and she was pleased with what you had presented. And even though I don't have a proxy to vote for her, that's not allowed in our regulations or enabling act, she said if she was here, she would vote to close this hearing and issue the order of conditions. So with that, Liz, if you want to just go through what you presented to us, that would be great.
Certainly. So when I was last here, I got a lot of good feedback from the commission. We compiled the comments we received in a letter and have adjusted the design as requested. So my plan was to just quickly run through these comments and then turn it back over to you guys for any further questions.
Fantastic.
So, okay. So Chair Parker, you had raised concern over the LOMAR and how it has an appeal period that is valid through October 20th of this year. We've provided language for a condition that we agree to not start work prior to that appeal period running out. And that if there was an appeal filed that modified the LOMAR, we would come back and amend the order.
Okay. And just quickly on that, because this was something we talked about that was a matter of first impression for us, I did a little bit more digging. And in the event that we would, how should I say, like in this case, set a new reference map, we're using the FEMA flood map as our reference map here. And by recognizing an amendment to it, we're basically making or creating a new reference map for the commission. In the ordinance, there's language that says if we take an action like that, we actually have to treat it as rulemaking and go through a 30-day comment, have a public hearing, have a 30-day comment period. So unlike an ANRAD with, let's say, an inland wetlands resource area that, you know, someone is trying to get a determination on, this is a little bit different. So we would not be able to, as you had your NOI, accept the LOMAR anyway. So hopefully that clarifies things. It's a nuance. It's something I didn't know before we actually had you bring this in front of us, but that's our position on it.
Okay. Are you able to accept the limits of the LOMAR within the proposed project area then? And
Yes,
not
it doesn't. Yeah.
Okay.
It wouldn't have any bearing on whether we would actually issue an order of conditions at this point,
All right.
especially since you're not doing work, until the appeals period expires.
Okay. Thank you for that information. That's helpful. Okay, moving on. Commissioner Sullivan had, oh, did I skip one? No, Commissioner Sullivan had asked just relative to the maintenance of the path. We are proposing porous pavement and just with snow removal on that. Circling back with our maintenance team, we are planning to brush the path. Porous pavement, once exposed to sunlight, does tend to de-ice much quicker than typical pavement, and we would just be maintaining it in accordance to best management practices. Commissioner Long had a great question just about how we were going to prevent public contact into the area that we're trying to establish a living fence with, and we had discussed potentially putting signage up, alerting people that they shouldn't go back there. Again, circling back with our maintenance team, they prefer to just install a fence for the 2-year establishment period rather than trying to educate the public. So that is how we're going to proceed with that. Also, with the invasive species mitigation that we talked about, we did provide language for a condition that we are agreeable to, just noting that we will submit a plan about invasive species removal prior to doing that work for review and approval by the executive director within 30, and then the review should be completed within 30 days of the submission.
Thank you, Liz.
Commissioner Hanan had asked about resiliency and sea level rise. I did reference our significant undertaking that we went through with our MEPA filing and the studies that had been performed. Actually, if we could flip to our slides, if that's possible, there's, I'm gonna have you skip. Keep going, you're going to the back. So we had worked with VHB on, well, VHB had commissioned an extensive resiliency study on the site. This exhibit up here is showing the 4.2 foot sea level rise scenario with a 100-year rainfall event. And we have a variety of scenarios going here. We have our no build condition and our full build condition up at the top, as well as the phased analysis. And you can see that through the mitigation measures that we're doing under our full build, we are reducing the level of flooding. The measures include adding tide gates, upgrading the regional pump, stormwater pump station, as well as raising our roads and providing some flood storage throughout the site. So we provided the 1.5 feet of sea level rise exhibit, which equates to the 2035 scenario of business as usual, not changing anything, and the 4.2 feet of sea level rise, which equates to the 2070 business as usual sea level rise. So the worst case sea level rise scenarios. Did acknowledge that during 2070, in the event we get the 4.2 feet of sea level rise, the 100-year storm event, and then a 100-year tide, that we will see flooding on the path for about 2 to 4 hours. But this is consistent with our resiliency strategy, which utilizes the open spaces for flooding. And the final comment that I had listed was from Commissioner Hurst. And if we could go back up to my first slide. She had noted that the limit of work was about 2 feet from the bank on the H series. We were able to increase that offset to 10 feet by tightening up our grading in some areas and also reducing a little bit of an excess of shoulder we had off of the back of the path. So with that, are there any further questions?
Great. Yeah, let me go around. Elena, did you have anything?
I didn't have anything on this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Liz, I thought I had asked if you were putting in permanent water line down
We
this
are.
path at this time.
Yes,
Yes,
we
you
are.
are.
You did. Yes.
Oh, and so I asked it and you answered me and I forgot. Okay. And I
and
think
then
my
you had.
question, hey, I think
Yeah,
my question was a lot better than Nick Long. So I'm just letting you know.
And I had referenced that we will be discussing that in a separate forum when we file our site plan review application with you. And you had further asked if the water line would be active or not.
Yeah.
Which is something we should also discuss and come to a resolution. And I'm open to your feedback on that.
Okay, that's all I had.
Okay,
Okay,
perfect.
good. Yeah, Liz, we're a very sensitive group. You should probably refrain from that. Great question, Commissioner Long.
Oh, thanks for the tip.
See
You
what
guys all
happens.
had great comments.
There you go. Much better. Commissioner Long.
Yeah, Liz, thank you for answering my great question and my regular question. Happy with that condition language. It looked like, yeah, initial invasive removal and then subsequent management. So that sounds wonderful.
Great,
Great.
thank you. Commissioner Wilson?
Sorry, mute problems. All good on my front. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Commissioner Conan?
Thank you, Chair Parker. Liz, thanks for addressing the resilience questions. I just wanted to understand what you said about the 2 to 4 hours flooding. Is that what you said?
Yeah, so the exhibits that I showed previously, those were under normal tide scenarios. So that's your worst case sea level rise. So your 4.2 feet in 2070 and your 1.5 in 2035 with a 100-year storm event at a normal tide condition. If during 2070, there's a couple ifs in this statement, okay? If we get the 4.2 feet of sea level rise and we get a 100-year storm and we get a 100-year tide event as well. So the probability that Mark's team has mapped that out to is 0.005%. So very little. We would see flooding within the path for about 2 to 4 hours. So it does recede after the storm, after the tide cycle goes out.
I see. It just recedes back into the inner harbor.
I would think, yes, it would go wetlands first and then ultimately to Belle Isle where everything drains to.
And is the pump involved at all in this process?
Yes. So as part of our efforts that we have committed to through the MEPA process, we are going to upgrade the Bennington Street pump station, and that happens later on. So you can see that in those exhibits, we did a phased analysis on how the flood waters were impacted on each phase of the development with the goal of making sure that no abutters received any rise in flood water. So I think it's when we get to phase 4 that we'll be looking to do the upgrades to the pump station.
What time period would that be?
Phase 4, I think we're looking 20 years out or so. And there is a commitment to go back to MEPA at that time prior to just doing the upgrades and rerunning the resiliency analysis. Like I said, this was a very extensive process and we had onboarding from DEP and CZM as we did this. And one thing I did talk to Elena about as well, I think that would be beneficial is, you know, before we start on any either roadway and infrastructure project or building project in Boston, we had previously come to the commission just as an informational session and presented our resiliency analysis. That was some time ago. I think it was in person pre-COVID. So I think we would be due back to provide a refresher on that.
So the last question then. So all the calculations go out to, and I appreciate that it's a low probability event that you've estimated for, go out to 2070, correct?
Correct.
Any idea what would happen beyond that?
Mark, do you have a response to that?
Well, what's interesting, hi, good evening, Mark Costa from VHB, is the 4.2 feet of sea level rise is actually also considered a high scenario out into 2100. There is a greater probability, but it's still in that like 1 to 2% chance of occurring out into 2100. So 4.2 actually looks at both 2070 and 2100.
So I guess that means these estimates are a worst case scenario estimate and likely will hold beyond 2070.
Yes, very low probability of occurring in 2070.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Richmond?
I don't have anything further. Thank you for the great answers to the great questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Just want to remind members of the public, if you want to provide public comment, please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging the Twitter handle @BostonEnviro and using the hashtag ConComHearing. Okay, are we all set on the order of conditions, Elena?
We should be all set on the conditions, yes. With the note that we would also be then adding the condition that Liz had included, the drafted condition that was included in the supplemental materials.
Yep, the LOMAR. Yep, okay. So with that, I don't see any raised hands. Any other means of communication, Elena?
No raised hands, nothing in the chat, nothing in the inbox.
Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion to close the hearing and issue the order of conditions this evening with the addition of a special condition regarding the work not commencing prior to the LOMAR appeal period ending on October 20th, 2023.
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Commissioner Conan?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond?
Aye.
I vote aye, so it carries 6-0. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is notice of intent for DEP file number 0061949 in Boston, file number 2023-039 from VHB on behalf of Vertex Pharmaceuticals, Inc. for the proposed reconfiguration of an existing paved parking, loading, and service area for new building equipment, including a new electrical service, new transformer and switches, new gas pads, and a new emergency generator located at 1 Harbor Street in South Boston. Resource areas are land subject to coastal storm flowage and designated port area. Who's here on behalf of the applicant?
Mike Ragusa from Vertex.
And sorry, John Hessian from VHB. I was having trouble finding my unmute button.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So again, John Hessian from VHB here tonight representing Vertex Pharmaceuticals for their proposed improvements at their facility located at 1 Harbor in the Ray Flynn Marine Park in South Boston. Mike Ragusa has already introduced himself, and Mike's going to go through some brief introductory comments about Vertex and their presence in South Boston waterfront and the seaport in general. And then I'll slide into the more technical aspects of our presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And
Thanks,
if you
John.
go to the next slide, please. There, thank you.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Ragusa. I'm a senior project manager here at Vertex. And as John mentioned, we're here to talk about what we call the VCGT GMP manufacturing fit out of EMC, which is a long way of saying this is about a 30,000 square foot R&D and manufacturing suite fit out, which is driving need for some additional infrastructure in the yard, which you'll see shortly. But for those that might not be familiar, so One Harbor Street is Vertex purchased this in 2020. Vertex has been in the Seaport since they moved from Cambridge in 2013. Happy to be in the neighborhood. We're active participants in the flood mitigation planning and feasibility efforts at Raymond Flynn Marine Park, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. And it's a big part of sort of the master planning discussion that we have within our walls, at least. So we're looking forward to forthcoming resiliency efforts along Boston Harbor and Resiliency Boston. So this John will get into the scope a little bit more, but this is similar to a project that some of you folks may have seen back in 2018, where we had a backup generator, chiller, and some lab waste storage, similarly on elevated platforms in an area that's adjacent to the area we're going to talk about tonight. I also wanted to mention that this particular project is the first phase of a larger effort and future projects that will be happening at One Harbor Street. So this isn't the first time, well, excuse me, this won't be the last time that we present to you on next steps and future projects. So we look forward to seeing you again sometime down the road. And I just wanted to acknowledge our project partners here, EDIC. We own the building as a long-term lease. Eversource has been very helpful, helping us shape the design and figure out how to get the elevated platform to work along with their standards. And of course, my counterparts here at Vertex, who will be working in the facility once it's delivered. So just a quick overview. I'll turn it back to John. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. If you could move to the next slide, please. So I always feel a picture is worth 1,000 words, but just for everybody, people probably know the general location, but One Harbor Street, you can see here outlined and identified as the site with the bold black leader there. It's bounded by Northern Ave, kind of on the north, Dry Dock Ave on the south, and Harbor Street to the west. The proposed work that we're going to describe in more detail is located within that lightly white shaded box labeled area of work. And that area kind of within, call that the limit of the construction fencing of that area. It's about 17,000 square feet. And all of the work that will occur along that north facade of, west facade of the existing One Harbor Street building. Just to the right and below the leader arrow from the word site there, it kind of in the elbow crux of the building is the location of the former or the 2018 work that was presented to the commission. There's a new chiller, emergency generator, and some lab waste storage tanks that are located kind of in the crux of the elbow there. Next slide, please. And as the chair mentioned in the reading of the public notice, I guess, is the entire property and the proposed area of work are both located within two resource areas. That's the reason we're here before the commission tonight. The first resource area is land subject to coastal storm flowage, as defined by the floodplain identified on the FEMA flood maps. And it's a little bit obscured there, but the FEMA 100-year flood elevation at this location is elevation 10. Translating that to Boston City base, that's 16.46, and most of the other information presented tonight will be in Boston City base. Next slide, please. second resource area that the site is located within is designated port area. And that's shown here, crosshatched in the kind of lime green, labeled 1 Harbor Street there. We're just inside the South Boston designated port area as shown on the CZM maps. Next slide, please. And I won't spend too much time on this slide, but this is at the actual site plan included in our notice of intent application materials. In just a second, we'll switch to the next slide. As I mentioned earlier, I believe a picture's worth 1,000 words. So we can refer back to the actual civil drawing, but this is a rendered version of what's on the civil drawing overlaid on an aerial photo. I think it provides it's easier to read, more clarity, and really gives a sense of what's proposed and where it's proposed on the site. So I'll walk through kind of working from right to left. In the in the upper right, in the middle of Harbor Street, there's a label there, New Eversource Electrical Service. That's a big part of what's driving the work here in that we're calling it a utility yard area. To operate the R&D and manufacturing operation that Mike described earlier, we need additional power at this 1 Harbor Street location. So as Mike said, he mentioned Eversource as a partner in this. We've been working with Eversource to identify, how to bring additional electric service into this building to serve this future use. That we would connect to a manhole in Harbor Street, run a line into the site to a new switch, new transformer, and additional, electric transfer switches and such to provide the service to the building. That will all be installed on an elevated structural steel platform, and I'll get into more detail on that in just a second. You'll see in dashed line work there, future electrical equipment location. Again, as Mike mentioned, this is phase 1 of, future, and, Vertex has future goals and improvements for this facility at 1 Harbor. And so we've laid out the utility yard such that we will have the ability to add an additional transformer and electrical switchgear if necessary to service future uses. So we're planning for today, but also trying to plan, future-proof the site so that it can accommodate additional uses in the future. And then again, sliding a little bit more to the left, a diesel generator elevated on a structural steel platform. That's an emergency backup generator for this R&D manufacturing 30,000 square foot suite, as Mike described it. And again, just to the left of that, in dash line work, a future potential emergency backup generator. Again, trying to future-proof this site, planning for additional growth and services to be provided in this building. And then to the left of that future generator, bulk gas storage tanks, again, on elevated platforms. And outside the work area, we've shown a fenced area to the left there, construction field office location. That will be your typical construction trailer, just temporary structure or temporary use just during the construction and fit out of the interior work, and then this exterior utility yard work. And as I mentioned, the electric equipment and also the generator and also the bulk tank storage area will be elevated above the 2070 base flood elevation. I mentioned that the Boston City base, the current FEMA 100-year flood elevation is 16.46. Rough numbers, call that 16.5. The current 2070 sea level rise base flood elevation is 19.5. And all of this equipment is being proposed to be installed a foot above that base flood elevation at elevation 20.5. So roughly, approximately 5 feet above the existing ground surface out here. And lastly, we've shaded the area of the site that's currently asphalt pavement in a light gray, and the area of the site that's currently a concrete kind of loading dock truck pad. We've shaded that as concrete. The goal here is to install these facilities using, or the elevated platforms using mini piles for the structural foundation work to really limit the area of disturbance of the site. But what area is disturbed with the installation of the mini piles or limited trenching for Eversource is to replace the existing pavement in kind under the elevated equipment structures. Next slide, please. And this is an architectural rendering, a perspective view from essentially across Harbor Street, looking, I guess that would be looking somewhat southeast back towards the One Harbor Street building. In the background here, on the left side of the figure is the elevated electric equipment, the switchgear and transformers. The proposed emergency generator, again, elevated on a structural steel platform, the potential future generator, and the bulk storage tanks cannot be elevated on a steel platform. They are proposed to be elevated on a concrete pad with essentially concrete retaining walls to elevate that pad up to that same elevation of 20.5, or 1 foot above the sea level rise base flood elevation. As Mike pointed out, this is kind of the initial phase to get this interior fit out of this 30,000 square foot manufacturing and R&D facility. Vertex has plans to do additional work on this building, resiliency improvements and future improvements to the building. And I'm sure we'll be back in front of this commission in the future. And there are also plans, Vertex working with their landlord, potential plans to make improvements to Harbor Street. That's one of the other phases that will likely be back in front of you for is, if people are familiar with this location, the sidewalk along the One Harbor Street frontage along Harbor Street is a flush sidewalk, as this was previously for years, many years, a trucking terminal. So the sidewalk was flush so the trucks could drive over it. It's likely that working together, Vertex and EDIC, that the improvements to Harbor Street will likely include raising that sidewalk, which will again trigger a justification to come back before the commission. I'm just going through my notes. And I guess the last thing I wanted to really mention was that, the applicant, we have reviewed the draft order of conditions provided by staff and replied to staff that, we had no comments or requested revisions on that draft order.
Great. Okay. Thank you, John. So a couple quick questions. Stockpile management, is this a 21E site?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So LSP will be characterizing soils if necessary, right?
Yes. And so yes, an LSP will be characterizing the soils. The mini piles are, part of that is to minimize, any earth disturbance, but any materials will be, put in sealed containers, and then that can't be reused on site will be put in sealed containers and removed and disposed of at an appropriate disposal site.
Great. So it'll be sealed. So you're not going to be leaving any stockpiles in the land subject to coastal storm flowage?
Yeah, correct. No exposed stockpile materials.
Fantastic, good. Okay, I'll leave the stormwater questions to Commissioner Sullivan. Quick question on design flood elevations. Well, actually, the emergency generator. I assume you're gonna need an air source permit. I'm looking at the generator here. As far as spill prevention, I don't know where the diesel tank is, but I assume it's autoclaved and in a trench, no real risk of any sort of spill.
Believe that's the case. It's the same, it's essentially the same generator that was, permitted and installed in 2018.
Okay, so it was permitted in 2018. That's good. That's good
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
So I know what the standards are. Okay, good. Then as far as the design flood elevation, later on in the hearing or this evening, we've got the BPDA's Flynn Park resiliency plan here in front of us. And I'm looking through it, and it says that tenants, I guess, will respond to the BPDA sea level rise, design flood elevations at the 100-year storm, 1% chance coastal, with 40 inches of sea level rise and 1 or 2 feet of freeboard. So I think you're depending on the type of use. So I guess you're relying on the 1 foot of freeboard because of the use here. Is that
Correct. I mean, our interpretation of that is this is critical infrastructure, to support the building. It's not an actual building use. So our interpretation of that is that the 1 foot of freeboard applies to this, to the, call it critical equipment external to the building. But some of the future improvements that Vertex is looking into and kind of master planning now will be, we're aware of what is happening with resiliency in the marine park, and will be in accordance with and in support of those goals, future goals.
So there are other uses that could actually require the 2 feet of freeboard. It doesn't specify in the plan here. Maybe we'll get clarity on that later in the hearing, but okay, good. That's all I had. Thank you. Eleanor, what do you have?
I don't have anything in particular, and I know that you already noted that that the conditions looked good to you, so that was my only note.
Fantastic. Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, what's in those bulk gas storage tanks? What kind of gas is that?
Carbon dioxide and oxygen.
Oh, okay. And the question was mentioned on stormwater. How does that drain now? I know it's the area what it looks like. And are you putting in infiltration or anything to take care of pollutants?
So the site and portions of Harbor Street today all drain towards the building to a couple of trench drains that run parallel to the face of the west face, the Harbor Street face of that one harbor building. In, I believe it was 2005, the previous long-term leaseholder of this property did some improvements through Boston Water and Sewer, through your Boston Water and Sewer Commission, and installed 2 particle separators between the trench drains and where they connect into the storm drain system in Harbor Street. As the chair inquired just a minute ago about this being a 21E site, the existing soils and the environmental condition really preclude us from looking at any opportunities to provide stormwater recharge or infiltration on the site. So our goal in this plan, again, all the equipment's elevated, is to punch a few holes in the ground, mini piles, to be able to build some elevated platforms to support the equipment, and then restore the site to its existing paved condition and maintain the storm drain system that exists out there today with no changes.
Yeah, I guess so. You're saying there are some stormwater pollution prevention devices. You know if they're in any condition or do they still work?
We don't have any detailed inspection information, but there are two 1,500-gallon particle separators. We could easily, you know, as kind of prior to the start of construction, you know, inspect and clean if necessary prior to construction, and then maybe again post construction to make sure that they're operational and that they haven't been compromised during, you know, the construction operations. They are pretty remote, or not pretty. They're not within the proposed work area, so I wouldn't expect that they would be damaged in any way, but any potential sediment that they would collect. But the goal is to really control, because of the 21E issues, as the chair had mentioned, control any excess or soil spoils during construction.
Right. So, yeah, I would just ask staff to make sure we have a condition that, number one, they do get inspected with a report telling us how much dirt. There's probably 1,500 gallons worth of dirt in there. And then after you clean them, come up with a maintenance plan where, you know, what, not that you have to submit it to the commission, but it can be reviewed. That at least once a year, they're inspected and some kind of maintenance log is kept on them. Because everyone puts them in and no one maintains them. So that was my only request. That's the only question I had.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Long.
Good evening. You'll have to excuse me if I'm off base here, but I couldn't find an existing conditions plan in your plan set. Is that in the overall site plan, or I might have missed something, John?
It's not a separate plan, but the existing conditions are shown in a lighter line weight on the site plan, the overall site plan, and the utility yard plan.
Got it. All right.
You do have to kind of maybe squint a little bit at those.
I see what you mean. And part of why I asked that is that I frequently bike by here, and I did notice construction fencing up, and I wasn't sure if that was from a previous project or not. Maybe Michael or from Vertex might be able to answer that.
So there is you might have noticed a construction trailer there as well. Because they've mobilized mainly because we're in pre-construction right now. So that's just delineating the area.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, no further questions then. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilson.
Yeah, no further questions here. Thank you for the thorough presentation.
Thank you. Commissioner Conan.
Just wanted to understand the gas storage aspect a little bit better. Was carbon dioxide mentioned?
Carbon dioxide.
How much of it is going to be stored here?
Oh, I don't have that number at the tip at my fingertips, but Mike, do you happen to remember the?
Or if you know the storage tank capacity, I think it's probably the same answer.
Anybody?
I'm looking.
Oh, you are. Okay.
I'm looking. I would like to. So it's a 6-ton vessel. And I have to apologize. I am not a this type of gas, carbon dioxide gas, expert 6-ton vessel.
Commissioner Conan, if you have any other questions, I'm actually.
Sure, yeah, we can move
Version
on, yeah. Let's,
Yeah.
if you have the information at some point, I'd appreciate learning
Sure.
about it. And so the generator you said is a diesel generator?
Correct.
Because I mean, even when I look at the rendition here, it just like it certainly looks like you're doing everything you need to for resilience, but in terms of the use of fossil fuels that's continuing right on the water here, this is DPA, right?
Yes.
And is this is this work DPA related?
Is the work designated port area?
Whatever is happening on this site.
It's research and development and manufacturing for Vertex Pharmaceuticals. It's a pharmaceutical use.
Right. Okay. So as you mentioned, it's critical infrastructure. Seems like there's a lot of gas storage here, diesel generator. And this only part of the plan, the rest of the plan we can't see. And I'm not sure it is DPA related. And you mentioned something about stormwater recharge. There will be no stormwater recharge. Is that what I heard?
That's correct. And that's due to
because it's a 21E site.
21E site, correct.
Okay. So Chair Parker, I'm just curious, there is in general development, there's a requirement for so much stormwater to be stored, and in 21E sites looks like that is exempted. Does that mean there will be stormwater overflowing out of this development? I'm not sure how that's reconciled between 21E and the requirement for storing stormwater, or maybe Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah. What I can say is that 21E site, the stormwater would have to be regulated. If anything's going to leave the site, there would have to be a discharge permit. So ostensibly, nothing would be leaving the site that touches a pollutant.
I see. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, and 6 tons of CO2 is the equivalent of a hot air balloon or 3,000 fire extinguishers.
That helps. Thank
For
you.
some reason, also 121,000 iPhones charged. I don't even know what that means.
What that means.
To put it in perspective. Thank you. Commissioner Richmond?
I'm afraid I have some of the same questions. And I just want to be sure that everything that's going to be stored a foot above the high rise projected level is not hazardous. Was that was a question? That was a question, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think the diesel certainly, I'll let John answer it, but I think that inherently there's going to be some materials that would be classified as quote unquote hazardous.
Correct.
21E.
I mean, the bulk gas storage would not be, classified as hazardous under, like 21E. But the generator fuel will be, obviously it's stored with the generator so that it can fire up. It's limited. It's typical of what you see. Most of the new buildings or uses in the seaport have backup emergency generators with a limited amount of fuel to maintain power for shorter periods of time. They're not for extended uses, and they're pretty customary to be in an appropriate sealed safe storage ancillary to the generator itself.
My concern is this, and whatever is being stored outside in this raised area that you've described that is hazardous. You know, I appreciate that the best we can do is to use the maps as they're drawn and, you know, reasonable expectations about the future. But, you know, looking at even just this summer and what has occurred, I guess I'm very skeptical about why we would approve something that is only 1 foot above that. I mean, is there a reason that you can't go higher than that so that if, you know, it was not right at that level, but was right, you know, at 3 feet above what you're supposed to be? I mean, I can't, I'm just very uncomfortable approving things that have potential for hazardous discharge in an environment where, to be perfectly fair, we're guessing at what some of these levels are going to be. And at least what we've seen so far is that a lot of our guesses aren't right. So is there a reason you can't put the hazardous stuff higher than just a foot above these levels?
Well, the foot is to the top of the elevated structure. Then the generator and the fuel storage associated with the generator would be above that. We could definitely look and work with the generator supplier to see if there's opportunities for that, where that fuel storage, the diesel fuel storage, is located on that, above that elevated platform, is not right on the platform, but, you know, maybe a foot, 2, 3 higher up on above that 20.5 elevation that we set as the top of the platform. Everything else is elevated above that. And as you could see from the perspective, the platform would be at 20.5, and then the generator, I don't know the exact dimension, but say it's about, you know, 7 or 8 feet tall. So that's elevated, obviously, up to 27, 28.5 to the top of the generator.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that you guys are paying attention to all of this, and I don't suggest that you're not concerned about it. It just seems to me that, you know, a lot of these figures are guesstimates, and that given what we've seen in the last year or so about, you know, extremes which nobody ever expected to occur in a variety of climate issues, that, you know, putting stuff which we agree is hazardous in a place where it can be you know, destroyed and into the environment there just makes me very uncomfortable. So, you know, to the extent that you can talk to your engineers and think about ways, I mean, I'm very impressed, and that's, you know, in an understatement, with the power of wind and water these days. And I just hope that you will think about putting the things that could do real damage higher than, you know, 1 foot above what the projections are. And if the base of it is going to be 1 foot, that at least you move the equipment that has the hazardous material higher up and protect it in some way, so that if your calculations, and I'm not suggesting, you know, that you're not done the right thing, but if your calculations prove to be incorrect, which seems to me that a lot of calculations these days are, that we're not going to have this stuff spilling into the harbor.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make the comment that fine that you explore the feasibility of raising the tank, but there is also the tension between raising a tank like this and maybe putting it on supports, which can compromise the structural integrity. So want to make sure that a lot of times, Commissioner Richmond, the laying down of these tanks sort of flush with their base. is actually the safest way to ensure that you don't have a rupture or any sort of breach. So if you could report back to staff before the installation as to what you found and what the safest configuration for the tank is, that would be appreciated.
And my only comment to that, Chair Parker, is that, you know, then the base has to be raised. I understand completely what you're saying, but if the base is still 1 foot above, you know, the projected high water, and you're absolutely right, I presume about the structure and the solidity of having it closer to the base, then in my opinion, the base ought to be raised.
Okay,
But thank you, that's helpful.
sounds good. Okay, Elena, anybody from the public?
Nothing in our inbox, no hands raised, nothing in the chat.
Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion to close the hearing and issue the order of conditions with 2 conditions. One regarding the annual inspection of the stormwater features, and Commissioner Sullivan, I can't remember which ones they were, with the submission of a maintenance plan to staff. And also, if you could investigate the possibility of raising the emergency generator tank higher and get that back to staff as well with your findings. Would anyone make that motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
Commissioner Conan.
Chair Parker, is it okay to ask a question very quick? Does the DPA designation play
Yeah,
into
we're
our
in the
decision?
vote, but go ahead. What is it?
Does the DPA designation play into our ruling here or not?
No.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Richmond.
Aye.
Okay, and I vote aye, so that carries 6-0. Okay, thank you.
Great,
Let's
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is notice of intent for DP file number 0061955 and Boston file number 2023-045 from Niche Engineering on behalf of the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation for the proposed demolition of Charles Bank Playground and the construction of a new playground, and I have to say it, which will be titled the Gronk Playground. Located at Leverett Street in the west end of Boston. Resource areas are 25-foot waterfront area and 100-foot buffer to bank. Who's here on behalf of the applicant?
Brittany Ferber with Niche Engineering.
And Skylar Chick from Shadley Associates.
Great. Okay, floor is yours.
Can we go to the first slide, please? So I'm Brittany Ferber with Niche Engineering, joined by Skylar Chick with Shadley Associates and Ruth Heldfeld with the Department of Conservation and Recreation. The proposed playground is located where the existing Charles Bank playground is. And just to orient you a little bit with this aerial view, the right is north. So to the north, we have the State Police Barracks. To the west, we have the Charles River. To the south, we have the Alfond Spray Deck, and to the east, we have Starrow Drive. The entire project site is located within the Charles River Esplanade, and we've been coordinating this project with the Esplanade Association as well as obviously DCR. To give you an idea of what the existing park looks like, we have some existing conditions photos to go through. So at the top left, this is taken outside of the park. So on the right, you can see a green fence and the playground is enclosed by that fence. And then there are matured trees directly to the west of the playground. And then the Charles River is just out of view to the west. The photos on the top mostly show the view from outside of the playground. So then if we shift to the bottom of the page, you can see what the existing playground itself looks like. The blue and gray material that you see on the ground is an existing poured in place rubber play surface. It's a pervious material. And then you can see a little bit on the next picture, there's an asphalt walkway that goes around the perimeter of the playground interior to that fence. And then in the next photo to the right, you can see an existing tree. There are 2 large trees within the existing playground, and those will be maintained throughout construction. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So that existing green fence goes around both the spray deck and the playground in that existing condition, as well as in between the two. So the fence separates the spray deck from the park, although there is a pathway still to get from one to the other. It's just gated. Can you go to the next slide, please? So this graphic shows kind of that proposed condition and our resource areas. So starting and working our way out, you can see the 25-foot riverfront area. We are just on the edge of that, but we are not proposing any work within the riverfront area. And then we have the 25-foot waterfront area. You can start to see we have more work within that zone, and then we have the 100-foot buffer further to the right. In the proposed condition, that fence that we looked at is going to remain around the spray deck and the playground, but the part that separates the 2 areas will be removed. And then we will be constructing a new ADA accessible path from the playground to the spray deck. And then if you look in that Alfond spray deck area, that's where you see the lawn. There's a path, like I just said, and then we have some picnic tables that will be on concrete pads. And then in addition to that, we're proposing 5 new shade trees in that area. And the trees will be 2 different types of species, both of which are native to Suffolk County, according to the Vascular Plants of Massachusetts publication. And then for the playground, the existing play equipment, the existing benches, all of the existing site features will be removed, and the existing play surface will be removed as well. We will maintain those 2 existing large diameter trees, and that one that you see on the 25-foot waterfront is about 39 inches in diameter, and the one just outside of the 100-foot buffer is 47 inches. So those will be maintained, and I'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing to protect them a little later. The dark green and the blue and the brown colors that you're seeing are all poured in place rubber play surface, and we will be proposing crushed stone below it to provide fall attenuation and also help with our stormwater management. By removing that asphalt walkway that goes around the perimeter of the playground and introducing the rubber play surface, the porous surface instead, we will be reducing the amount of impervious cover on the site by about 2,200 square feet. Can you go to the next slide, please? I want to talk a little bit about what we are proposing for erosion control and construction access. We do not have any existing drainage structures on site or proposed drainage inlets on site, so we are not going to have any inlet protection within our limit of work. We do show perimeter control around the exterior of the limit of work, so we'll be using that existing fence that you saw in the photos for construction access and keeping people out, and then just interior to that there will be the perimeter protection. And then to the north of the site, just north of where you see that blue, you see an enclosed fenced area, and that is where stockpiling and staging will occur. So it will be outside of any resource areas or the 100-foot buffer, and it will also have the perimeter protection around it. Construction access will happen in 2 locations. So it will happen just where the spray deck and the playground meet on the west side, and then we'll also have access on the north side. The reason for having 2 points of access is to try to prevent construction vehicles from driving into and through the tree protection zones over and over. So I can talk a little bit more about what that tree protection zone is in a minute. The existing site, like I said, it doesn't have any stormwater structures. It doesn't connect to the city system. It doesn't connect to a DCR owned system. The porous play surface has crushed stone below it, and water is able to infiltrate through the surface and into that crushed stone reservoir below. And we want to maintain that drainage pattern in the proposed condition. So what we're proposing is to have crushed stone below most areas of the playground, with the exception of that light blue area that you see by those two existing trees. That light blue area, we're proposing to rip up that existing play surface and replace it with the new play surface. Presumably there is some crushed stone there already, but we're not going to replace it or add to it because of the proximity to the trees. The design team hired Bartlett, an arborist, to help examine the health of the trees and advise on how to protect them throughout construction. And that innermost area, we really can't be doing much excavating. So you'll see the play equipment is all outside of that area as well. As we move further away from the tree, we can have more stone below and you start to see the play equipment. So that bluish gray area just outside of the light blue area below, we'll be pulling up the play surface that's there and then removing a minimum of 4 inches of material from below it. And if that material fits our spec and is a good crushed stone material, we'll reuse it. Otherwise, we're going to put in new crushed stone to provide that 4-inch depth. And that will again be for fall attenuation and to help infiltrate stormwater from the porous play surface. Moving out further, you see that brighter blue area. So now we're outside of the tree protection zone there. Within the tree protection zone, they're going to be doing hand excavation and really limiting the equipment that is used there. So once we're in that brighter blue, they won't be doing the hand excavation anymore. They can excavate deeper. So we're going to have a 12-inch depth of crushed stone below that play surface to help capture the runoff and infiltrate it into the ground. And this really mimics the existing condition out there, and it will help us provide additional infiltration capacity for the site. And I think with that, I would like to open this up to questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brittany. Thanks for the comprehensive presentation. You answered all my questions. Especially appreciated the way you kept us in suspense about the tree protection.
I got to make sure I keep your attention throughout my
You absolutely did. Okay, Elena, do you have anything on this?
I have nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Brittany, I know you got calculations on that sheet.
Yes.
Are you, with the stone base, are you assuming you can hold 1 inch of water?
Yes.
And then after that, and when that gets saturated and you can't take any more, how does the water run off if there's no structure?
Yeah. So there are kind of two patterns that would happen. One, water would pond within the playground, and then around the edges of the site, it would run off towards the Charles River over the grass and the esplanade.
And it runs off as a good sheet, so you wouldn't have any erosion. If you collected all that water, once it's saturated, it's like pavement. And does it flow along a line, a perimeter, or does it come in one spot or leave?
No, it would be along the perimeter.
All right, that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Long.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Brittany. I saw the trees were being planted by the Esplanade Association, and coming from my Boston Parks Department kind of experience, I'm wondering, is DCR going to do the watering or aftercare, or Esplanade Association?
Ruth, are you able to help answer that question?
Yes, hi, thank you. Ruth Helfeld from DCR. Yes, I believe the Esplanade Association does plan to maintain those trees.
Okay, wonderful. I'll leave any other tree questions to Commissioner Wilson.
Great, that's gracious of you. Commissioner Wilson, you might have a question here.
I actually don't. No, I mean,
yeah,
I'm sorry to disappoint, but
okay.
I appreciate the detail and the native trees being called out in the NOI. It made our jobs easy.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Conan?
Thank you, Chair Parker. Brittany, is the tree protection area here, I'm just kind of learning this part of conservation, is to protect the roots? Is that what it's for?
Yeah, you want to protect the roots as you're excavating, because the more roots that you damage, the more likely you are to eventually kill the tree.
Right, and where you were explaining how the water will run off,
Mhm.
you said it would just sink in the playground itself, and it will also run off the playground into Charles River, correct?
Eventually, yes. So we have that crushed stone below and that porous surface to let the water through. In extreme events, we might see some water that does run off into the esplanade.
But does it sink first?
Yes.
And then the extra water is what runs off, right?
Yes.
Okay. How does the water flow within the playground?
There's a low point within the playground. So water will flow towards the low point.
Where is that low point?
Can you go back to our slide, please? I don't know exactly where it is on this plan, but I do know that near one of the trees there's a low point, and then it's kind of in that grayish blue area.
I see. So it'll flow towards the tree.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it is already, the landscape. And you're going to protect that.
Yes.
I see. Great. Thank you. That's all.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Richmond?
I just have a question about what's there now. Are you able to observe, I mean, how is the crushed stone that you're proposing different from the crushed stone that's there now? Do you know?
That's a good question. We don't know the exact depth of the crushed stone there now. We won't really know that until we start to excavate, really. So in the event that there is more crushed stone than we are proposing, like that will remain. So in that bluish gray area where we're saying that we're going to have 4 inches of crushed stone, if we dig down 4 inches and there's still stone, we're not going to remove that, we're going to leave it. So it's really hard to say. We're trying to maximize the amount that we are providing to make sure that we think that we have an adequate volume, but we don't know exactly what's there now.
So the crushed stone is for purposes of having water runoff. Does it have an impact on what happens when a kid falls down on the surface, on the rubber surface above it?
Yes, exactly, it does. So in the light blue areas, you'll notice we don't have any play equipment because we don't have that crushed stone below, which helps when the kids fall. The dashed lines around the play equipment are what's called the fall attenuation zones, and those are also outside of that light blue area. So the 4-inch depth is the minimum for the fall attenuation, and that's why that's the depth within the tree protection zone, and because it's really the minimum that we can have. And then once we're outside of the tree protection zone, we expand it, but that minimum requirement is 4 inches.
And why is it that you're taking down the gate between the playground and the splash pool?
Skylar, is that something that you can speak to?
Sure. Yeah, so the idea is that it opens up the playground to the splash pad area because they're really play functionally linked in many ways. It's 2 areas for kids. It also allows the playground to extend towards the lawn area on the left side of the screen a little bit. So it just makes it a little bit more welcoming and friendly and open for all people.
And do you know, this is not within the jurisdiction of the commission, but I'm just curious, is this going to be a playground which is open 24/7 or what? I mean, there's so many parts of the Esplanade that are closed off, even though they're supposed to be public access.
I'm Sandy Libby. I'm the DCR playground planner, and I can just tell you a couple things that we're closed after dark. That's pretty much across the board with DCR playgrounds, and but we don't lock gates. So it's a public area. And we also, just to add, you know, have opened this up. So as you notice, when she spoke of the use zones around the play equipment, you can see we've been able to incorporate a good amount of equipment for older kids and younger kids within this, and to stay out of the tree areas. And we were able to do that with the bump out and still have, you know, all the swings and all the different types of play that you'd want to have in there for the kids' development.
Hey, thank you very much. I really appreciate the work that you guys have done to do this. I probably am going to vote for this unless Gronk signs with the Giants, and then I'm not voting for this. Sorry.
Yeah, he's retired.
No, there was a story today that he's thinking
Oh, no.
about going back to play for the Giants. That
Uh-oh.
would
Yeah,
be very.
Okay, I think he crossed that line with the Bucks, but anyway. Okay, so Elena, I don't see any hands raised. Do you,
No
you-
hands raised. And I'm also not seeing anything in the inbox.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, and it looks like, I'm looking through the file here, it looks like the order of conditions is okay to the applicant. Looks like we can vote
I
on both
think-
of them.
There was the 1 point that I reached back out about. Just wanted to confirm that that was okay with snow management.
Yes, DCR will submit their general snow management plan to the commission, just with the caveat that there is no snow removal planned for the playground itself.
Great, thanks.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, so with that, I would make a motion to close the hearing and issue the order of conditions.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond.
As long as he stays retired,
Okay. I vote aye, 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Next item on the agenda is notice of intent for unassigned DEP file number and unassigned Boston file number from Collins Engineering, Inc. on behalf of the Boston Planning and Redevelopment Agency for the proposed removal of a concrete deck at the existing pile-supported wharf at the south and east jetty, installation of a soldier pile bulkhead landward of the existing steel sheet pile bulkhead at the south jetty, and the removal of on-site stockpiled soil located at 3 Dolphin Way, Harbor Street, South Boston. Resource areas are land subject to coastal storm flowage, designated port area, land under ocean, coastal bank, and 100-foot buffer to coastal bank. Who's here on behalf of the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. My name is Jason Tobin, and I'm here before you to introduce a critical project for BPDA. It's at the South and East Jetty and the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park, and I will hand it over to Danielle Gaudreau of Collins Engineers to present.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Again, my name is Danielle Gaudreau. I also have Ryan McCoy on the line, project manager for the project. Depending, he might chime in here and there if needed. But the project is located at 3 Dolphin Way. I think most people on the call are familiar with the Marine Park. I think the biggest and most obvious scope item for the project is demolition of the existing concrete wharf at South and East Jetty. The wharf is currently failing due to deteriorated piles beneath the structure, and removing that concrete deck would alleviate loads and prevent additional failure. Like you said, the project also includes installation of a soldier pile wall, installation of protective coating on the existing sheet pile, which we'll get into a little bit. If you don't mind going to the next slide. You can just go to the next one. Thank you. So I just included these just so you can get an idea of where the project is actually located. So you can see on the left, it's right next to that dry dock there. That includes the South and East Jetty. There's also a North Jetty, but that's not included as part of this project. You can also see the FEMA flood map here. The entire project site is located within the flood zone. It's zone AE15 and AE12. The line between those two flood zones are about where the existing bulkhead is. You don't mind going to the next slide. In addition to the FEMA maps, as part of the project, we also looked at climate change as it relates to the site and also the surrounding area. Obviously, the City of Boston has done a lot of resiliency planning for the city. And within the Coastal Resilience Solutions for South Boston report, the Marine Park was identified as an area of being at risk for flooding, both short-term and long-term. Obviously, we are in a flood zone. The report also indicates that widespread flooding could happen at least monthly with 40 inches of sea level rise in the year 2070. On the flood map, you can see our project site, and one of those flood pathways is actually located at the North Jetty, just north of our site. So this flood path is where waters are anticipated to overtop the structure and really flow into the surrounding area within the marine park. Now, because the flood pathway is really beyond the project limits, designing this structure to protect against future flood levels might not divert or inhibit flooding to the surrounding area. This project really is intended to address immediate stability concerns and safety concerns within the existing bulkhead and wharf. But that being said, we are designing this bulkhead for a 50-year design life. 50 years correlates to the year 2070. So this bulkhead that we are designing is designed to accommodate installation of future flood protection projects. It's not part of our project right now, but the BPDA is also working on a flood resilience mitigation feasibility study that's led by Arcadis. They're also working on a few other coastal resiliency projects within the marine park and beyond. The Arcadis project is ongoing right now, but it's essentially building off of that effort that the city has already put in with Coastal Resilience Solutions, and they're evaluating the feasibility, cost effectiveness of district scale resilient design strategies within the marine park. So that's the future flood protection measures that are going to be built upon South Jetty. If you go to the next slide, please. Just wanted to include these photos again so you can get a feel for where the site is actually located. You can see in the left photo, the aerial, there was actually a portion of the South Jetty that was already demolished as it was starting to fill in that area as well. In the right-hand photo, you can just see the top of the deck looking west, so you can see where the dry dock is. You can also see the coastal cement silos on the other side of the channel. If you don't mind going to the next slide, please. And these photos show a progression. So when we initially started this project, we actually weren't going to touch the wharf at all. It was never really included as part of the scope. I think ideally the wharf would have been left in place until the site was eventually reconstructed as part of, the Marine Park master plan. But obviously it's developed to a point where it's become a threat to public safety. Right next to this wharf is the active dry dock and an active channel. So really that's where a lot of these safety concerns are coming from, is if that wharf falls into the channel. So back in May of 2015, movement of that wharf was first noticed. So we were under contract to work on the South Jetty project. We went out, we performed an emergency inspection. After that, we worked with BPDA to install emergency piles that you can see in that first photo there. Those piles were intended to stabilize the structure, but really to prevent the wharf from having an uncontrolled collapse into that active channel. In July 2022, you can see that photo there, went back out, or I'm sorry, December 2022, went back out, performed another emergency inspection. The wharf was continuing to fail. There were some more cracks noticed, some more movement, obviously. So the BPDA has been continuously monitoring this structure, and ultimately in July, a couple weeks back, this portion of the structure fully collapsed into the water. Good news is that the piles did their job, prevented the wharf from failing into the channel. And I should mention that we did go through the proper pathways for this. We did get an emergency certification through Conservation Commission. Everything was completed within 30 days. But the piles did their job, prevented full collapse into the water. But really, these photos, again, are meant to show a progression of the failure. The wharf is continuing to collapse, and the threat now is that the additional loads on the non-failed portion of this wharf could cause additional failures at this point. If you don't mind moving to the next slide. So the reason for the failure, this is a good depiction. The piles beneath the wharf are deteriorated, where there's really only the reinforcing left for a lot of these piles. They weren't designed to be able to resist those loads, so removing that concrete deck will really help to alleviate the loads and prevent failure. And you can see the photo on the right, that's the corner of the east jetty and the south jetty. So the condition is pretty much the same throughout east and south jetty. Move to the next photo, please. There's also some sinkholes behind the wharf. You can see in that first photo there. So there's some deterioration of the bulkhead. That's what we were originally scoped to go out and work on with the BPDA, is to install a new bulkhead behind the existing bulkhead, and to really create stability in that wharf and in that bulkhead. In the photo on the right, you can see the area that was previously demolished. That is right next to that failed area that was done back in 2014. But you can see that a large portion of that structure was removed and the existing piles were left in place for future reconstruction. If you could go to the next slide, please. So the wharf deck demolition encompasses all of the remaining portions of South and East Jetty, and that's about 50,000 square feet of indirect removals. It also includes removal of existing timber fender piles, those emergency piles that were put in place. It includes 105 feet of, we were originally planning on controlled failure of that portion of the failing wharf, but obviously it has already failed. So there really is no controlled failure anymore. It did control, and it was controlled and it did fail. But that's about 4,000 or 4,500 square feet of temporary direct impacts that are going to be removed. Again, the piles are proposed to be left in place, and that is for future reconstruction of this wharf area. And the project also includes about 4,000 cubic yards of stockpiled soil within the resource area, within the land subject to coastal storm flowage. And that is from a project that was done around 2019. Where a seawall was installed for East Jetty. So if you don't mind going to the next slide. For proposed impacts, there's only 560 linear feet of proposed bulkhead, and that's all at the South Jetty. Now, this proposed bulkhead is not being installed in the water. It's actually being installed behind the existing bulkhead. So you're not really going to see it at all. It's going to be installed below ground, but it'll still provide that stability that's needed for that bulkhead. In addition to constructing the bulkhead, we're also proposing 1,100 linear feet of sheet pile protective coating. And really that's being done to reduce corrosion of that existing sheet pile so that it can be used as erosion protection for the new bulkhead there. And that's being done at the South and the East Jetty, so all around. If you could move on to the next slide. This slide just shows other permits that we're seeking for this project, obviously working with Army Corps on this. I do want to note that we did coordinate with DMF regarding the project, and they said that they wouldn't be requiring a time of year restriction for this. I noticed it wasn't also in the draft conditions, but just wanted to point it out since we're really not having any real direct impacts to land under ocean and affecting the fishery. There's no time of year restriction for this project. The only other thing that I do want to point out is I'm aware that there's no DEP file number. I did contact DEP to see if we were able to get it ahead of this meeting, but didn't have any luck. That being said, we accept all of the draft conditions, and as we go through comments, if there's no concerns, I'm not sure if it's a possibility to maybe provisionally close the hearing without a file number, just given the circumstances and threat to public safety, but I do want to open the floor for questions at this point.
Sure. Okay, thank you. That was very comprehensive. Appreciate it. As far as your question about conditionally closing or provisionally closing the hearing, I still do, even if we close the hearing, it still doesn't get you where you need to be. We have to issue the order of conditions, unfortunately. So I'm not sure of the way around this. I've been thinking about it, and I'll think about it some more as we as other commissioners ask questions. But a few questions I have. You're using a turbidity boom, correct?
Correct. A debris curtain or a debris boom and turbidity curtain.
Okay, and a curtain. That was my question. I didn't see the curtain in there. Okay, thank you. Okay, and there's already debris, collapsed debris on the seafloor at this point?
That's correct.
Okay, okay. And I assume that it is pretty dangerous to try to catch any falling debris. So some debris is actually still, during the work, still going to reach its way to the seafloor. Is that correct?
So really what we're going to try and do for this project is really stabilize the rest of the structure. And if Ryan McCoy wants to chime in a little bit, just because he's been coordinating with some of the local contractors to talk about how to really handle this constructability wise, that failing portion of the structure, that was completely unsafe to have anyone working on, around, under. So that portion of the structure, we were planning on just allowing it to fail controlled. The rest of the structure, I think that there might be a way to stabilize it with piles so that it can be removed without really having it fall into land under ocean. That's something that we're working on right now to see what the best way to stabilize that structure and safely remove those pieces are. Obviously, there is the possibility of having, some debris, fall into the water, but I think there's also containment measures that can be put in place too, if necessary and if safe to go under that structure. But I don't know if Ryan wants to chime in at all, or if I pretty much covered that.
Hi everyone, Ryan McCoy from Collins Engineers. Yeah, I think Danielle covered it pretty well. It's, I don't want to say inevitable, but it is almost inevitable that some debris will fall onto the seafloor. There is a revetment in front of the wall right now, so it is a stone slope that's there now, but like Danielle said, we'll use containment measures. More than likely it'll be floating docks covered with like a geotextile fabric is one way to do it. Another way is, like Danielle said, using beams or piles to temporarily support some of that fabric to try and catch some of the smaller debris that'll fall down there. And that's kind of the bigger goal. Really, the way we envision it right now is that most of that will be supported from the top side, saw cut into sections and removed in the larger sections. So it's not like we're going to be over the water jackhammering this entire wharf into small pieces and trying to bring it out of there like that. So, there is some risk of small debris falling down there, but the intention is to go down and kind of collect that at the end of the project to the best that we can.
Okay, good. Yeah, that was my next question. I didn't see about the recovery operation, but that's fine. That works. Okay. You've got your time of year restriction all ironed out. So I think that does it for me. And Elena, I know that you had an idea of how we might be able to accomplish some sort of closure so that this emergency work could be done.
Yeah, so it would be I'm thinking about the steps here. I don't know that we'd be able to close tonight, but I think if an emergency was declared, we'd have to touch base about this maybe after the hearing, but I'm not sure what the exact parameters are for declaring an emergency on this. I recognize that you've already noted that there's risk here to human health, that type of thing. So I think if we could connect offline to see what that might look like. That's really the only thing that I can think of, though, as far as approving a project like this without having to issue an order of conditions, which can't be done since we don't have the DEP file number yet.
Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, we can talk offline. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. We can talk offline, but I think for an emergency certification, you need to complete the project in 30 days. And honestly, I think it would be safer to have the contractor take their time with this than to have to rush through it within 30 days.
Okay, yeah.
But we can talk about it if we feel like it needs to come to that. I just think that, maybe taking the extra 2 weeks and having the contractor take their time would probably be the better option.
Okay.
That works as well.
Great. Okay. Appreciate that, Danielle. Okay, Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, you said your design life estimate on this was 50 years for the remediation wall that you put in.
Yeah, that's correct.
And I assume that the original system was set up for sheet flow right off the dock. Is that correct? Or how was the drainage out there originally? And then what is your proposed state you're leaving it in?
So we're not proposing any changes to the drainage right now. The site is mixed. Some of it is bituminous pavement, some of it is just sand and gravel. So most of the site, I would say, is sheet flow, obviously, because it's a concrete wharf. But directly behind that wharf, when you hit land, once you're past the bulkhead, some of it is gravel, and so some of that water, does go into the ground and then eventually gets out through the sheet pile. It basically kind of like leaks through the joints, essentially. So we're not proposing any changes to that. We're just putting pavement back where there was pavement and putting gravel back where there was gravel.
And you don't think there'll be any, because of the sheet flow, any particular erosion issues even in 10 years?
I don't. We are leaving a portion of the wharf in place, and the idea is to maybe eventually reconstruct that. But even so, that's kind of the reason behind why we're leaving that existing steel sheet pile in there. We're going to be putting a protective coating on there to prevent it from corroding any further, and that's also being used to prevent scour and erosion of that sheet pile, or of our proposed bulkhead.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you have to put back pavement alongside, if you could pitch it back towards the gravel and let the gravel, because no one's using it out there. You could just have it sit on top of the gravel so it infiltrates and works its way slowly in, rather than have it sheet flow all the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what happens for, a good portion of the site, right? Is that it will go into that ground and it is pitched, and then it goes through those sheet piles.
Right.
Most of the site, I would say, is probably infiltration. Obviously on the wharf, it's sheet flow, but
Yeah, but if you had to put back, after you do your wall, if you have to put back some kind of surface, you could have that surface, rather than continue to sheet flow, have it pitch back to the land and let it get into a gravel substrate. Is that possible, or I'm not sure?
so
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Ryan, I don't know if you've looked into this at all a little more and want to talk about that.
Yeah, sure. Just real quick, the area that's paved right now is right next to the building that's out there behind South Jetty. There's just a portion of the site there. It is about 120 feet long out of the entire length of the site. Right now, that grading, it does look like it drains back towards the land side. It doesn't sheet flow off. And then the remainder of the site, like Danielle said, behind that bulkhead is gravel. So without the wharf there, I'd say probably about 95% of the site is infiltration. And then the last portion of the site, we're just restoring those grades, it doesn't sheet flow over the bulkhead, over the wharf. It does drain back towards existing catch basin there. So small drainage area, just draining back to that catch basin. So just restoring those grades should be fine. So it won't sheet flow. It should not sheet flow back over the
Right.
bulkhead.
Right. And if you could just take a look at that catch basin, make sure it's working.
Yeah, my guess is it's probably clogged, but as part of the work, we'll head out there and address it as we need to.
Yep. All right, that's all I had.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Long?
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilson?
Yeah, I just had a question in terms of the remaining section of wharf that sort of is the smaller U-shaped portion. I was just curious about why that was sort of stable, doesn't need to be removed, hasn't degraded quite as much as the other section, and whether there's sort of other additional reinforcement that might be necessary to it in the future.
The piles that are closer to the bulkhead are in a lot better shape. Most of that is because the piles that are, closer to the end of the wharf are more exposed. So they're more exposed to the elements. Piles closer to the bulkhead, they're less exposed. So just taking a look at it, we don't anticipate that it's going to need any type of of structural alteration in the near term, or between now and when they plan on reconstructing the facility.
Okay, yeah, I guess easy enough explanation. Thank
Yeah.
you. And then the other bit was just like in terms of sediment, or have you seen any sort of indications of sediment migration behind that steel sheet pile that's sort of on the quote unquote dry land portion? Coming out of there, I know sometimes that crops up in those conditions.
So there are sinkholes behind the bulkhead. So we have noticed migration, which, we're assuming it's because there's holes in the existing steel sheet pile, which is really why we're going to install this bulkhead to begin with. So yes, it has been noticed. We haven't gone under the wharf because it's unstable, but you can see from the sinkholes on the top side that there is some migration of that soil.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Interesting. Great. Thank you. Commissioner Conan?
Thank you, Chair Parker. Danielle, it sounds like it's an urgent problem to solve, but the 2-week period doesn't concern you as much.
The 2-week period doesn't concern me as much. I mean, the structure is imminent, and there's really, or failure of the structure is going to happen eventually, right? There's really no saying as to when it's eventually going to happen. There are piles that are installed adjacent to this failed area. So like we did account for the fact that this structure is probably going to continue to fail once it goes. So there are piles in there right now protecting an extra portion of that wharf that's still intact. We still need to go out to bid, still need to finish the design process. At this point, we're continuing to monitor the situation. And if it becomes an issue where it's starting to fail past the point of where these emergency piles are installed, then I think that's, a different conversation with the commission about going through emergency procedures. But at this point, we aren't necessarily concerned with where it's at right now. It's obviously, we need to keep this project moving in every aspect that we can. Push it forward, we are. But really just continuing to monitor the structure, and if necessary, going through emergency procedures. I hope it doesn't get to that point, but I'm not concerned right now, no.
How actively are you monitoring this?
I mean, BPDA staff are out there all the time. They obviously work in Boston. Before, their office was literally right across. Now, I know a couple folks that I think bike past the site pretty regularly. I do know that they're also in contact with the dry dock operators. So really it's being monitored very consistently.
Sounds like daily.
I would say it's probably daily.
Okay. I couldn't tell the dimensions of the failed portion of the wharf from looking at the pictures. Can you help me understand?
So the failed portion of the wharf, it's about 105 feet long, parallel to the shore. And then I'm just looking at the drawings here. It's about, I think, 43 feet wide. So 105 feet long by 43-ish feet wide.
I see. That is large, huh? Fairly. Thanks. You mentioned something that sounded interesting, that if the piles are more exposed to the elements, then they're likely to fail sooner, right? It makes sense. And does that mean the piles that are more exposed to the elements are reinforced more?
Not necessarily. I mean, it looks like they're all pretty much the same type of construction. Really, this structure has been rehabbed multiple times throughout its life. Waterfront structures are typically installed for like a 50-year design life, but then it's extended through these repairs. So right now, what's supporting this wharf is pile jackets. It's the remaining reinforcement for pile jackets, and that was installed after the fact as a repair to the structure. The outside piles aren't necessarily reinforced more. It's just there's been a lot of damage throughout its life on all the piles.
Should they be?
I mean, no, I wouldn't say no. I say so. I mean, it's not really part of the scope either for this. It's really just removal of this wharf. At this point in time, it doesn't really make sense to try and rehab the piles. Now we typically use fiberglass pile jackets that stay in place. So you have these stay in place forms, whereas when they installed these pile jackets back in the day, it was really just concrete and they removed the forms. So it all just got deteriorated over time. But the scope isn't really to repair these piles. It's not cost effective. It would be a huge rehabilitation project, and it would also probably require removal of the wharf and reconstruction of the wharf now too. So really it's about removing the deck, leaving the piles in place so that the piles can be used in the future, but really just stabilizing the structure, because originally, the wharf wasn't even included in this project. It was just the bulkhead installation to stabilize the bulkhead.
Got it. Okay, thank you. So nothing done here can affect the flood pathway, you said, in any way. Is that correct?
Correct.
So you can't make it worse either. Right.
Correct.
Okay.
The bulkhead that we're installing, you're not even going to see it once it's there. We're installing it behind the existing bulkhead, and it's going to be under the ground. You might see the top of it because it's going to be a concrete cap, but that's going to be flush with the ground. There's not going to be any type of curbing or seawall that might affect the floodplain.
Mm-hmm. How intact is the intact portion of the wharf?
I mean, it's a similar condition. So if you look at the photos, all of the piles pretty much look the same. I think the portion of the wharf that failed, it's on the end. There's probably a reason for that. The portion of the wharf that failed back in, 2014, it's adjacent to that. So put additional loads on this 105-foot section, caused it to fail. And then, the next portion that is going to fail, I would assume that it's going to be the portion that's adjacent to this portion. And it's going to basically continue to unzip until it fully fails.
I see. Last question. Are you gonna, if there's debris that sinks to the bottom, will there be like diving involved to remove it, or how will you take care of that?
I would anticipate that it would be removed with like a clamshell bucket, basically on an excavator. Ryan had mentioned that there is an existing revetment in this area. So, we're going to remove any pieces that fall down to the best of our ability. We will go out and check. We have in-house divers, so we can do that, to check if there's any large pieces that are missing. But I would anticipate it's going to be some sort of excavator to pick those pieces back up off the seafloor.
Thank you. That's all, Chair Parker.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Richmond?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Elena, anybody from the public raise their hand? I don't see anyone.
I don't see any hands, and I also do not see anything in our inbox.
Okay, so with that, I think we're gonna have to continue this because we have an unassigned number issue. Next hearing, hopefully, if you have a number, I think we only need one representative to come to the hearing, where we'd be basically voting on issuing the order of conditions. If you have any issues with the order of conditions, contact Elena over the next 2 weeks and try to get that squared away if you do. But other than that, I don't think you need to drag your whole team here.
Okay, and I'm assuming that we probably don't need to present the project again. It's just administrative. Okay.
Yep. Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion to continue the hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Great. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson? I think I heard an aye. Okay, Commissioner Conan?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond?
Aye.
And I vote aye, so that carries 6-0. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a request for a determination of applicability from Childs Engineering on behalf of the Boston Planning and Redevelopment Agency for the disclosure of future redevelopment of certain parcels proposed in the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park Final Master Plan Update located in South Boston. Who's here on behalf of the applicant?
That would be myself, Rich McGinnis, Deputy Director for Coastal and Climate Change Preparedness Delivery in the Real Estate Department at the Boston Planning and Development Agency. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission.
Great. Rich, could you, first of all, you need to reduce your title to an acronym.
Yes. I think it's
Second,
CRID.
maybe you shouldn't then. So that being said, welcome. Just a baseline question here that we've been struggling with. What are you actually asking for a determination for? There doesn't seem to be any work proposed in the RDA. So if you could just clarify that, that would be fantastic.
Sure, happy to. We wrapped up the master plan for the Marine Park. It was submitted to the state in 2017 after a 3-year-long public engagement process. The master plan is sort of multi-layered. It's an economic analysis on port industry and assessment of infrastructure, like you just heard in the last presentation. It's a planning approach. We've been going through the permitting process. We submitted to the state in 2017. There was a special technical advisory committee process that was formed after that. An initial certificate from MEPA was issued in 2020, and more back and forth with the state, with the certificates being issued approving the master plan last year. The next step to codify the master plan is to get a consolidated written determination under Chapter 91. As part of that process, the state required that we file for a wetlands permit. There's no actual construction being proposed through this step. This is just a master plan approval. So we opted for this request determination of applicability just to get certification of the jurisdiction of the CONCOM in the Wetlands Protection Act for the park. There'll be future projects that will be coming before the commission seeking their individual orders of conditions. So this was more of a procedural step to codify, I'd say, the plan, but no specific project or permit is being sought at this point.
Oh, fantastic. So that makes sense. So you're going for Chapter 91 licensure. Okay. So that being said, I think what you want to walk out of here tonight, or what you'll be walking out of here tonight, is a positive determination of applicability, that we have jurisdiction.
That's right.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. So please go ahead if you have anything else.
I mean, that's pretty much it. There was a master plan completed for the park back in 2000. It definitely needs to be updated. There's significant growth and pressures occurring in the South Boston waterfront, and also the need to protect maritime industrial uses. I'd say the most important thing of this master plan was doing an economic analysis of port growth trends. The majority of this 191-acre park is in a designated port area. It's reserved for maritime industrial uses. What are those uses? What are those growing port uses, and how do we invest in them? We've got some pretty good life from the infrastructure that was built by the Army and the Navy years ago, including the South Jetty that's probably 80 years old and now failing. Millions of dollars of investments that are needed. Understanding what port growth opportunities exist helps us invest in specific infrastructure. Dry dock, for example, is worth investing in. The ship repair is a growing industry, seafood processing, the cruise industry, a general marine terminal. So it's a roadmap on what we should be investing in for port growth. We also have our resilience plan. I know it was mentioned in a couple of the other presentations. Coastal Resilience Solutions for South Boston was published in 2018. Our master plan reflects that. How do we protect the park itself from sea level rise, but also what role does this real estate play in district scale flood barriers and protection? We've hired Arcadis to do a vulnerability feasibility assessment for the Marine Park. It's a $1 million contract, and we're looking at the vulnerability of our property owners to sea level rise, including Vertex, making sure that they are self-protected, but also looking at where a line of defense could occur in the park. It's great feedback on the storage of hazardous material, which we will definitely revisit. All the projects that'll be coming through the Conservation Commission will be subject to Article 80, but also Article 25A, which is the city's new coastal sea level rise overlay district. So they have to demonstrate to us that they're protected from the 2070 40-inch sea level rise projections as measured by the city's Boston Harbor flood risk model and the state's MCR-FM. So a lot has gone into this master plan. All the projects that will be permitted in the future will have to comply with our resilience efforts. They're also required to contribute financially into district scale flood protection. Another thing, I just listening in for the hearing, the South Jetty, while it may not host a flood barrier, we want to make sure that it's designed to accommodate additional load if we did need to put an elevation change or flood barrier on top of that. Our master plan and the state approvals are all published on the BPDA's website, bostonplan.org, for more background information. I believe there are 11 development parcels where new development will occur in the future. This Chapter 91 consolidated redetermination authorizes development, but requires that they seek individual Chapter 91 licenses. So there'll be public process associated with the individual Chapter 91 license efforts, but also they'll be seeking individual wetlands permits from the Concom.
Great. Okay, thank you. A couple quick questions from me before we get started. You answered one. 25A would be part of your review process. Also in your resiliency plan there. Question for you. Massport uses a different metric or formula than the BPDA does. We referenced that in a hearing earlier. So I think for existing buildings, they're looking at the 500-year storm plus 3 feet of freeboard, I believe. And for new buildings, they're looking at the 500-year storm with, did I get this right? Oh boy. Okay. Anyway, I might have just messed this up. So for 2070, they're looking for 500-year storm with 3 feet of freeboard. So the 2030 must have been less conservative. But regardless of how badly I messed that up, which of the two formulas, the BPDA's or Massport's, is more conservative, if you know? Or are they equivalent to each other, just stated differently?
Well, as the state agency, Massport should be working off the MCR-FM, Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model, and that's what we're working. That's what we're utilizing as well. If you look at the Boston Harbor Flood Risk Model that was developed by Woods Hole Group for Mass DOT, the 2070 sort of elevations, sea level elevations are sort of aligning with the 2050 for the MCR-FM model, and it really depends on the various probability analysis that's placed in there. But I think we're pretty much in alignment with Massport for our target elevations and readiness for individual buildings. But
okay,
the Article 25 is based upon our model, which is aligned with the state's model.
Okay, that makes sense. And the reason I asked the question is that we get Massport in front of us as well. So that way we know we're comparing apples to apples. Okay, good. No, to me, it looks like great work. And I'll just go around and see if anybody has any questions. Elena, do you have any questions for Rich?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
When will this Arcadis study be complete?
It should be probably wrapped up by early next year. We have an existing conditions report that we just received, and now we're just doing the due diligence with Arcadis on how to protect the individual properties, but also where does the line of defense occur. There are two options in Coastal Resilience Solutions for South Boston in the park. Option A, which is along the entire shoreline contour of the park. Option B, which is more of an inland approach. And option B could work if, you know, properties and projects were sort of self-protected, and could the area accommodate periodic flooding, sort of wet proofed. And we're not sure if that strategy is going to work. But also, if we do put a line of defense along the water's edge, how do we not cut off the ability for ship to shore transfer of goods and sort of the logical connection with the land and the shoreline? So we'll start looking into some recommendations of that over the fall, doing more engagement with stakeholders, including Boston Water and Sewer. And I'd say some wrapping up of this process probably early 2024.
Right, and how do you think you'll be able to coordinate anything you come up with the Army Corps that seems to be developing something for the whole city? Will you be able to feed into that process, or will it be too early or too late for them?
I mean, the Army Corps is doing a coastal hazard study for the city, and they're looking at long range flooding. I mean, work that may not happen until 10 years out. We're looking at sort of more immediate flood paths, flood risks, and that work that we would do that wouldn't preclude the Army Corps. I think what's great in our engagement with the Army Corps is that we can use the same target elevations, the same flood risk modeling. You know, they're going to focus on protecting critical infrastructure. Their benefit cost analysis will have to take into consideration. And, you know, they're also going to require that wherever they do their work, that there's that the rights of way are in public ownership, such that this
Right.
area would be. You know, we think Seaport could be a great candidate for their work. You know, we're looking at near-term flood paths up along the 4-Point Channel. You know, Massport's looking along the reserve channel, but the you know, there could be overlap with the Army Corps and the city and the state.
Right.
Area.
I just want to make sure that they know you're engaged in the study, so that they're aware of what might you can feed back and forth, and they can take anything into consideration. The last thing we need is a different study conflicting among public agencies, so the public says, "The hell are we all doing here?"
Yes. Yeah. No, we've been briefing them
all right.
on this, and then we have a similar study underway at Long Wharf and Central Wharf, and then we'll be conducting one in the Navy Yard starting this fall.
Right. Okay. That's all I had.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Long?
Thanks for the presentation and everything you're doing, Rich. No questions for me.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilson?
None here either. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Conan?
Thank you, Chair Parker. Hi, Rich. When you mentioned long range, what did you mean?
For the Army Corps?
Yeah.
Looking like the 2050 to 2070 to 2100 flood paths. You know, the city has 47 miles of shoreline. We're really focused on existing flood paths and near-term flood paths for action, and looking to the Army Corps to look at the long-range flood paths in the city that's sort of mapped out and color-coded through the various neighborhood resilience plans.
Thank you. So when you say immediate or short range, is that what, 2030?
20 existing through even up to 2050.
Okay. Now through 2050. So the 50-year period that we keep referring to, and we keep saying it's 2070, but it's 2023 already. So that means 50 years is not 2070 anymore. When is it going to be like updated?
If you look at the MCRFM, the Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model, it's less year, more of the probability and the target elevation. So I think the city's modeling looked at, well, gee, what's the likelihood of global intervention of carbon reduction, and we opted for the more conservative side, and that's where we, targeted 2070 with 40 inches of sea level rise, assuming there's no reduction of carbon loading, which seems to be the case. So, I mean, and those factors are built into MCRFM as well.
I see. And I think you said Massport and BPDA are following MCRFM.
Yes.
So the RDA here that you're for, and you mentioned 11 development projects. So does this mean they will be coming in front of the Concom for RDA, or they will come straight for the NOI?
They'll come in, they'll submit NOIs. So I would expect a few coming in probably over the next maybe 5 or 6 months. 22 Dry Dock, 24 Dry Dock, and 310 Northern Avenue. So they will be seeking their wetlands permit. They have gone through Article 80. They've gone through the Article 25A review. They are self-protected and elevated from our, 40-inch sea level rise projections, and base and design flood elevations are built into their designs. And they're also contributing money to the BPDA to invest in district scale flood protections. But yeah, they'll be seeking their individual Chapter 91 licenses and wetlands permit.
Thank you. I heard you referred to the DPA, and this can be outside of this meeting. I'd like to understand how the Vertex application pertains to DPA.
Vertex is a research and development, which is a general industrial use, which is allowed in designated port areas. By our permit with the state, 67% of the marine park has to remain marine industrial, but the other uses can be a mix of general industrial or commercial. And we've courted uses such as Vertex and other R&D companies just for job growth opportunities and investments as well. And they've proven to coexist. We've had lab space in the park over the last 25 years.
Thank you. So it could come in the 33%, sounds like.
That's right.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chair Parker.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Richmond?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Elena, anybody from the public raise their hand?
I don't see anybody.
Okay, so with that, Rich, again, want to reiterate our gratitude for all the work you do all over the waterfront. And I would entertain a motion to issue a positive determination of applicability.
So moved.
You have a second.
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Commissioner Conan?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond?
Aye.
And I vote aye. That carries 6-0. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. There have been a number of continuances. So continued our notice of intent for DP file number 0061704 in Boston, file number 2020-007, DP file number 0061820 in Boston, file number 2021-045, DP file number 0061772 in Boston, file number 2021-010, and a request for a determination of applicability related to the properties located at 2 Star Lane, 34 and 36 Willette Street in West Roxbury. We'll now begin our regular meeting. First item on the agenda is a request for a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 0061751 from the City of Boston Public Facilities Department for the renovation of the Paris Street School. Eleanor, what do you have on this?
Yeah, so staff was able to complete a site visit earlier this week. The photos from that site visit are available in the Google Drive folder for the commission's review. No notes on that. All of the work appeared to be complete. And based on that, staff would recommend that the commission vote to issue a certificate of compliance.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from anyone? Okay, with that, I'd entertain a motion to request.
Excuse me, is that correct?
Yeah, it's the
Okay.
pool.
Okay, thanks.
Did you get the recording going, Eleanor?
Sorry, yeah, it paused on its own,
Okay.
but now we're back.
Okay, great. Okay, so where was I? Can someone make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 0061751?
So moved. Second.
Okay, Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson? Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That carries 6-0. Okay, next item on the agenda is a request for a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 0061727. Yeah, 1726 from the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority for the Orient Heights Blue Line Station parking lot improvements. Eleanor, what do you have on this?
Similarly, staff conducted a site visit earlier this week, and the photos from that visit are also in the Google Drive folder for the commission's review. Nothing seemed to be amiss based on that, and based on that, staff would recommend that the commission vote to issue an incomplete, or excuse me, an invalid certificate of compliance, as they were not able to complete all of the work that was originally approved. And Chair Parker, sorry, I apologize if I misspoke on the type of COC. Okay, so I'm confused. So we're issuing a partial because some of the work wasn't performed? Correct, yes. So they I believe that they ran out of time to complete all of the work. Okay, so it's a partial. As far as the work that was done, you're satisfied that it was done in compliance with the OOC? Correct. Okay. Okay, good. So, any questions from any commissioners?
What work wasn't complete? Was it the paving?
So the paving was complete. Sorry, give me just one moment. So, so the maintenance work was complete.
Yeah.
And then let's see.
Well, I'll just bring up the Orient Heights parking lot illegally dumps stormwater into the sanitary system, which causes combined sewer overflows, and they will be put under order by us soon to build a pump station and get it out of the sewer. So that's maybe one of the things they couldn't finish completing because we wouldn't let them, do their work. So, but I think I'm fine with saying whatever they did finish, let's give them the yay. We'll fight it out later.
Okay, sounds expensive. Okay. Any other questions?
The part that wasn't completed, is there any impact of the incompleteness of that on the part that is completed?
Not to my understanding. And I'm sorry, let's see.
No, I don't think there is. I mean, what they've got to do is take water, a huge amount of water, out of the sanitary system, and that's a whole Clean Water Act federal problem, MWRA, DEP regulations, our regulations. It's a good old MBTA issue.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Sounds like fun. Nothing like multi-jurisdictional enforcement orders. Yeah. Okay. So with that, I would entertain a motion to issue a partial certificate of compliance for, I forgot where we were. DEP file number 0061726.
Please, just sorry to.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sort of, yeah, Commissioner Sullivan's point. I recall when we were talking about this, that was a pretty major part of what we were hoping they would do, and they did agree to it. And obviously, it's contingent on budget. But do we know of any plan moving forward, absent just compelling them through an order?
I believe Weston and Sampson has been engaged by them to take another look at the whole thing. But what they tend to
So
do
there's
is take a look.
progress. It's not just that, this costs more than paving and fixing a catch basin. So we didn't do it.
They're going ahead and look at it again, and they realize it's a massive undertaking. But I'm not sure that scope of work is totally within Weston and Sampson's job. Perhaps it'll be a change order.
So Jeremy Fontaine, you have your hand up. So
yes, sorry,
yeah,
I was having
go ahead.
some mic issues on my end, but my name is Jeremy Fontaine. I'm an environmental compliance officer with the MBTA. I was having some audio issues trying to address any questions or anything brought up with this issue with the Orient Heights project.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So do we have any questions for Jeremy since he's here?
Jeremy, am I correct that Weston and Sampson has a contract out with you guys for the parking lot?
Do you mean to finish the work that was originally proposed in the order of conditions?
Yeah, the drainage, remember the drainage structures, they were gonna look at them and find out if they connected to the sewer, they do.
Right, to my knowledge, nothing's moved on, or they've only did minor work at Orion Heights. There is no future right now, or any future plans that I'm aware of that the project manager has let me know that's going to happen at the project. So if Weston and Sampson, I can get back to the commission, but not to my knowledge.
Okay, because I have it in writing that they were engaged. The MBTA sent me that. Whatever. So we don't need to stay here all night for this. But if you say there's no future plans, if anything, everything's out another 3 or 4 years. So
Yeah, if work were to happen again here, we would definitely reapply for resubmit an NOI. But as of now, because I asked the team that if it would be better to submit for an extension or just request incompletion, then they didn't want to go for an extension.
Okay. Okay, anything else for Jeremy? Sounds like no. Okay, Jeremy, thank you for coming. And next time, don't bring your friends, please. Thank you.
I swear that was not me. I don't know. I don't know what that was.
Okay, so with that, I think I don't even know if we got the motion out before, but I'll start it all over again. Entertain a motion to issue a partial certificate of completion for go back. DEP file number 0061726.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So that carries 6-0. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda are administrative updates.
Well, I didn't have anything, and honestly, I think that I've been upstaged. So, yeah, I think that's it for me.
Okay. And quick question on that. Both you and Nick said you reported. What do you report? Who do you report to? I didn't know about that function.
So yeah, it for at least on my end, it may be I'm not sure if it's because I was recording, but it popped up as if you would like to report the activity, and apparently Zoom took an automatic screenshot.
Oh wow. Okay.
Nick, did you have an option did that show up automatically for you, or did you report otherwise?
Yeah, I clicked the 3 dots in the top right of their panel and I clicked report, and then I just clicked yes on the pop-up screen as quickly as possible. I didn't read it.
It's the same. We have the report option even now for all the windows. So you could do that. The other option is to stop video. I did that for one of those.
Gotcha.
Okay. Okay.
And now an interesting question, I guess, is whether well, I guess one, perhaps I'm just going to start my video so that but yeah, one I guess administrative update could be that we've started uploading our recordings of the hearings to YouTube rather than having them just be in a Google Drive folder, which I think is easier for most people to access. And now this raises the question of if we can somehow edit the recording to not include that, because I don't know that would be a great thing to include.
Have to.
So we'll see. But yeah, other than
Talk
that,
to legal. Talk to legal about that, please.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so that's we won't be doing that first thing tomorrow morning. We'll definitely be having some conversations.
It's a bad look. It's a bad look.
Not great.
Yeah.
Not great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. Next item on the agenda is acceptance of the following orders of conditions. First one is notice of intent for DEP file number 0061947 and Boston file number 2023-036. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Commissioner Conan?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That carries 6-0. Next item is acceptance of the order of condition for notice of intent for DEP file number 0061920 and Boston file number 2023-035. Do I have a motion to accept that?
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That carries 6-0. Continued was acceptance of the following order of condition for intent. Notice of intent for DEP file number 0061928 and Boston file number 2023-018. And that looks like it's a DCR issue, so that might be continued for a while, hopefully not. Okay, last item on the agenda is an acceptance of meeting minutes from August 2nd, 2023. Do I have that motion?
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
and I vote aye, so that carries 6-0. Okay, well, we've all been waiting for a motion to adjourn by acclamation. Any objections?
Nope.
No.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Christopher. Take care, everybody.
Good
Thank
night.
you all. Have a good night.
Good night.